The wind moved gently through the streets of Baku. The deep silence of the night seemed to have exhausted even the endless chaos of the city. The distant sounds of passing cars echoed softly, hesitant, slow, and tired. But there was one house where the silence felt much heavier. A large villa overlooking the Caspian Sea, elegant in its architecture and glowing faintly beneath the night sky. Yet inside that home, the silence was not born from a single night. It was the echo of years filled with unspoken pain. Murad stood in front of the wide glass window, watching the trembling city lights in the darkness. His eyes were fixed far away, though in truth he saw nothing. He was a respected and successful businessman. His name often appeared in the media, and the programs he attended attracted admiration and attention. To the outside world, his life looked perfect. But beneath that perfect image lived a deep emptiness no one knew about. A void hidden behind his pride, success, and strength. The soft sound of footsteps from the hallway briefly interrupted the silence. Layla entered the room. She wore an elegant yet simple dress. As always, she looked graceful. She was a well-known lawyer, especially recognized for her work defending women's rights. With her sharp intelligence and determined presence, she had earned everyone's respect. But tonight, there was exhaustion in her eyes. Not only physical exhaustion, but the kind that reaches the soul. Without turning around, Murad asked quietly, "Are you tired?" Layla smiled faintly, but it wasn't the warm smile she used to have. "A little," she answered softly. That little carried the weight of many years. They had been married for 6 years. In the beginning, everything had felt like a fairy tale. Love, trust, dreams for the future. Their eyes would shine whenever they spoke about having a child. They had even talked about how they would decorate the baby's room someday. But as time passed, those dreams slowly turned into waiting. And every passing year became heavier than the one before. They had gone to hospitals countless times. Endless medical tests, doctor appointments, hopeful beginnings, and every single time, they returned home empty-handed. Sometimes they tied their hopes to the tip of a needle. Sometimes they placed an entire future onto the result of a tiny test. But never once did they blame each other. Not even once, because they both understood. Some things are simply beyond human control. Some doors only open with time, and some never open at all. Layla finally broke the silence. "We're going back to the clinic tomorrow, you remember, right?" Murad nodded slightly. It was no longer an answer. It had become a habit. Another doctor, another hope, another uncertainty. The day changed. It was the weekend. They were returning from a friend's wedding. The night was still young, but the exhaustion inside them felt unbearable. Layla was wearing a classic black dress that evening. Her hair was carefully tied back, and around her neck hung the delicate diamond necklace Murad had gifted her during the first year of their marriage. Murad, dressed in a black suit, looked as charismatic as ever. Sometimes Layla still couldn't stop herself from looking at him. But now, those looks no longer carried excitement, only longing. As they drove through the quiet streets toward one of Baku's luxury neighborhoods, the streetlights cast a pale yellow glow across the cold night. Just as they turned a familiar corner near the garbage containers, they heard something. Layla suddenly grabbed Murad's arm. "Stop, did you hear that?" Murad hit the brakes, and the sound of the engine faded away. Both of them listened carefully. And then, they heard it again. A baby was crying. That fragile, trembling cry echoed through the deep silence of the night. It sounded as though not only a child, but an entire life was begging for help. They looked at each other. Without saying a word, they stepped out of the car at the same time. Behind the garbage containers stood an old, worn cardboard box. There was slight movement coming from inside it. Layla's hands began to tremble. Her heartbeat quickened. Slowly, she bent down and lifted the lid of the box. And there she was. A tiny baby girl with large brown eyes filled with tears, trembling little hands, and soft pink cheeks. She couldn't have been more than 15 days old. A thin but carefully wrapped blanket covered her small body. But there was no sign of whoever had left her there. Layla held her breath. It felt as though time itself had stopped. Slowly, she lifted the baby into her arms. And at that moment, something inside her broke. And at the very same time, something inside her was reborn. Murad pulled out his phone with trembling hands. His voice shook uncontrollably. "Hello, we found a baby." Near the garbage containers, abandoned. But for Layla, the world was no longer the same. Because the tiny miracle she held in her arms might have been the destiny they had waited for all these years. Silence, except for the faint sound of a baby crying in the middle of the night. As the moonlight reflected off the rusty garbage containers in one of Baku's quiet neighborhoods, Murad slowly bent down and carefully checked the box once again. The freezing night air had reached his bones, yet he felt nothing at that moment. Layla stood a step behind him, trapped somewhere between fear and shock. She couldn't stop her hands from trembling. Her heart was beating so fast it felt as if it would burst out of her chest. After a few seconds of silence, Murad slowly pulled the box closer. Inside was an old, worn cardboard box. And in it, a baby. A tiny little girl who couldn't have been more than a couple of weeks old. Her skin looked pale. Her lips were dry. Her tiny hands trembled while her tear-filled eyes tried to understand the world around her. Inside the box, there was only a thin baby diaper, a torn blanket, and a folded piece of paper with no name written on it. Layla could no longer hold herself back. She rushed forward instantly. "Murad, is she breathing? Please tell me she's breathing," she said, her voice breaking through tears. Murad carefully checked the baby. "Yes, but she's very weak. We need to get to the hospital immediately." Without another thought, they moved quickly. Murad gently placed the baby into Layla's arms. At that moment, Layla's entire world changed. It felt as though that tiny little body had filled the emptiness growing inside her for years. They got into the car, and Murad quickly took the driver's seat. Even the sound of the engine felt different that night, as if fate itself was trying to lead them somewhere. Hospital. The moment the emergency room doors opened, nurses rushed toward them. The baby was immediately taken into a special care room. Layla couldn't move. She stood frozen in front of the door. She could still feel the warmth of that tiny body in her arms. She was terrified that the moment she let go, everything would disappear. Murad approached her and handed her a glass of water. Layla didn't even turn her head. "It's the first time in my life I've ever held a baby, Murad," she whispered with a trembling voice. "And I don't want to let her go." Murad said nothing, because his own throat was tight with emotions. At that moment, words felt meaningless. Hours passed. Finally, the doctors stepped out of the room. The baby was dehydrated, freezing cold, and severely weak from lack of nutrition. But she's lucky. Her condition is stable now. Layla took a deep breath, but her tears still wouldn't stop. The doctor continued, "This appears to be a case of abandonment. We'll need to notify the police." Police investigation. Shortly afterward, police officers arrived at the hospital. The scene, the box, the blanket, everything was examined carefully. But there were no clues. No name, no note.
No trace.
Only a tiny baby and a fate abandoned in the darkness. Layla kept staring toward the baby's room. Something deep inside her refused to walk away. Murad already seemed to have made his decision, though saying it out loud wasn't easy. One of the officers spoke in a calm but cold tone. "If we can't locate her family soon, the baby will be transferred to social services and then likely to an orphanage." Those words pierced Layla's heart like a knife. She immediately looked at Murad, and Murad looked back at her. There were no words in that moment. Only one silent sentence. "We can't lose her." Returning home, a silent change.
3 Uhr nachts.
The villa looked exactly the same as before. The same walls, the same lights, but the people living inside it had completely changed. Layla lay down in bed, yet she couldn't close her eyes. Every time she tried, the sound of the baby crying echoed in her ears. "It feels like she's still in my arms," she whispered softly. Murad hadn't slept either. Quietly, he walked into the kitchen, prepared 2 cups of tea, and returned. We're going to apply to social services, he said calmly but firmly. If it's possible, we'll bring her into our family. For the first time that night, hope appeared in Layla's eyes. But it was a fragile hope, a hope that could easily break. What if they refuse? She asked quietly. Murad stayed silent for a brief moment. Then we won't give up. The beginning of a new life. As the morning sun rose over Baku, Murad and Layla stepped out of the house. They had no proof.
No guarantees.
But there was one name in their hearts. Marin. Looking out the car window, Layla whispered softly, "If destiny allows it, I want to name her Marin, a name filled with light, love, and peace." Murad gently nodded. "It feels like she chose you too," he said quietly. And the car stopped in front of the social services building. The door opened, and from that moment on, nothing in their lives would ever be the same again.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Adventure, mystery, drama, and a little bit of horror, stories of every kind are waiting for you. Do you love stories full of surprises? Then subscribe and don't miss a single twist or hidden secret.